The biggest mistake that we can make is thinking that you are going to crunch and sit up your way to a six-pack. Debunk that right now, okay? It's not going to happen. Isolation and trying to lose belly fat by doing sit-ups all day long is not going to work. It's not going to happen, okay? That's not the function of your core. Okay? We can't control where we lose weight, right? Abs are made in the kitchen. You want a six-pack? Stick to your nutrition plan. That's the best thing that you can do for yourself, okay? So spot reducing is not going to happen. But while this is a great motivational force, okay, what we need to understand is that the benefits behind core training far outweigh the need or the want to have a six-pack. Okay? That's probably the biggest point that I want you to take away from today, is what the core does for you, what the function is, and how to properly use it. So that's what we're going to be primarily focusing on today, right? So education piece, and then I'm going to show you some things. We're going to work on it, show you how do you properly brace your core, right? How do you understand what to do? What do we cue to tell you? And that's why I had you get mats, because these are things that you need to feel. I can tell you all day long, but until you do it, you're not going to really understand it, right? So like any other muscle, and I have my notes to follow just because if you train with me, you know I will get off on a tangent. So if I don't follow my notes, then I'll go way off track. But any other muscle that we build in our body, okay, you can build your abs too. So when we think I'm just going to crunch all day long and get sit-ups or get a six-pack, your abs work just like any other muscle in your body. You can build them up, right? So when we add resistance, which a lot of my clients know, we use all the toys. Dumbbells, barbells, medicine balls, kettlebells, we use all the toys, and all those things add resistance. As far as the gym floor, you got that cool machine that's over by the hammer strengths that you load up and you can crunch here. You got some that are over here. So those are resistance for your core, but they have a primary focus on just your frontal abs. Okay, the one over here you can actually rotate and hit some obliques. You can turn your legs to the side and you can actually get down some of the obliques, but for the most part, that's just hitting your rectus abdominis, which is your frontal abs. Okay, but the ability to grow your abs, absolutely, right? The primary objective of your core is to stabilize. Okay, this is a big cue. I was telling my class today, talking with a friend of mine who was doing a seminar. He told his client said to him, like, we didn't even do core today. Because if you train with me, it's core all day, every day. It's usually the first thing we do. It's every single session, right? His client was complaining, saying, we didn't even do core today. What's wrong with you? And he's like, are you kidding me? He's like, every movement you did today was core. There isn't a single lift on the gym floor that does not use your core. There's not a single thing that you do, from loading the dishwasher to squatting the hell out of some weights, that does not require your core. So when we talk about bracing, this is what we're talking about. Moving safely, stabilizing your body so that you can improve performance, but that you can move safely. Okay? How many of you have experienced lower back pain? Enough said. Okay? So your core is made up of 29 different muscles. I'm not going to go through and name them all. We're just going to call it front, sides, back, top, bottom, in, and out. Okay, we're going to keep it simple. I could grill you all day long on anatomy, but there's no point to that. Okay? All of your muscles are used, of your core, are used to not only stabilize, that's the primary, but to add movement, to mobilize, to add force and power, in order to excel at the mobilization and the power transfer. Okay, the power transfer from your lower half to your upper half and vice versa. We have to know how to stabilize first. Okay, you have the ability to brace your core in an improper position. This is a dangerous thing. This is a dangerous place to be, because when you think that you're stabilized, when you think you're in a neutral position and you brace your core and you go to lift something heavy or you add a quick movement, that's where we hurt something and we tweak something. Okay? When you have a degraded core for your lumbar spine and you're lifting improperly, or you have an anterior or posterior pelvic tilt, your spine is not in a neutral position. When you go to lift something heavy and you go to make a movement, that's where you're going to pinch a back and you're going to feel back pain. Okay? If your hip flexors are tight, if your glutes are tight, if your hamstrings are tight, everything pulls. Everything is connected. So if I'm tight here, I'm pulling through my glute, I'm pulling through my joint, my SI joint in the back. What's that going to tug on? What's the next thing up the chain? Your back, your lumbar spine, right? Once you impede that, once you cause something deep in those core muscles, that is tough to get rid of. Okay? That's tough to get rid of because your core is layered. Okay? If you think of weatherproofing a pipe, okay? If your spine is the pipe, okay? Imagine that you put a sealant on the inside around the pipe, okay? You put a tight sealant. That's a lot of little intercostals, interspinatus, right? From each vertebrae of your spine, you have little muscles that go this way, that go that way, that attach and skip one and go down one and attach to the one below, crisscross applesauce, all the different directions. Like it's a spider web of these little muscles. You tweak one of those, you can't stretch it. You can't work it out. It's just going to be a constant nag until it heals, right? So proper bracing is going to prevent that. Outside of those little muscles, that little weatherproofing is a big foam. You're outside, okay, of the spine. This is just in your lumbar spine, your lower back. Okay, then you have an inner wrapping that goes around that, and those are your primaries. Okay, your intravertebral, those are the little guys. Those attach directly to your spine. Okay, those are your stabilizing muscles. Okay. The bigger muscles on the outside, that's what contracts when we add load. That's what you can flex. Okay, those are the ones that we can stretch and that we feel more predominantly than the little guys. But the problem is when we add load, the big muscles take control. Kick back, little dude, I got this. Right? Because they contract. So they kick the little muscles out. So sometimes when we're doing core, you might feel silly if you're working your stabilizers because you're doing things like bird dog. You're doing things without load. You're doing things with no weight. And you're like, what is this accomplishing? Just because there's no weight doesn't mean you're not accomplishing anything. You're working those little guys. You're working those stabilizers. Because you can't use load to do that. Okay, we can use body weight. We can use rotation. That's all fine. Okay? And that's what's going to build up those intervertebrals, the small guys. We have to put a focus on that in training. It's the only responsible way to train somebody, especially if they're brand new to fitness. As a trainer, I have no business taking you out on the gym floor and loading you up with heavy weights if you don't know how to control your body or keep your body in a safe position. It should be the first thing that you think about every single time you touch a weight. Phase one of any movement, doesn't matter what it is, a bicep curl, a leg press, doesn't matter. Step one is to find your brace and to find your position. Before you even think about what happens next in that particular movement, your first step is to brace. Okay? So now the question is how do we brace? What does that mean, right? There's a lot of arguments on what's a proper brace, what's the best practice. There's a bunch of different methods. Okay? The one that I resonate with the most, that I find works the best through your lift, okay? This is applied to recovery breathing. When you're winded in between sets, take your heart rate down as best you can, use this technique, okay? In between your reps, focus on your breathing. A lot of the times we just say breathe in on the way down, breathe out on the way up, okay? But how do you do that? How do you do that and hold your core? Okay, so what I want everybody to do is stand up. And I want you to take a big breath and I want you to pull it down deep into your diaphragm. So your belly should expand. If you put your hands on your tummy, you should feel your belly expand as you breathe in. That's step one, okay? Holding that belly out, taking that deep breath. Step two is to flex like you're about to take a punch to the tummy. They say tucking, you tuck your belly button into your spine. Do that while holding your breath. Okay? Now your abs are flexed in the front. Okay? The third, and we do that before I move on. You do steps 1 and 2 in the eccentric phase of your lift. Okay? Each lift has an eccentric and a concentric phase. Your eccentric phase is the relax or the return. The concentric is the push, is the actual work. Okay? You do steps 1 and 2 every single time you hit the eccentric phase. Okay? When you add the weight, when you push the weight, when you pull the weight, that's the concentric. I want you to fix your lips in a pursed position. An easier way to understand that is breathe out of a straw. Okay? Everybody do it. Step 1, 2. Okay? You can have a seat. So we'll explain the reasoning. So now I want you to work on that, like I said, even when you're in recovery heart rate. Because what this is going to do is xylophone your lungs. It's going to provide more oxygen per breath. It's going to take your heart rate down faster because you're giving more oxygen to your muscles. When we're doing that in lifts. Okay? The purpose behind doing this is when you pull that deep breath down into your diaphragm and your belly expands, think of a Bosu ball. Okay, what you're doing is you're filling 2/3 of your lungs in your lower lungs, 1/3 in your higher lungs. But if you have a Bosu ball to press against, that's your lungs. You're filling your thoracic cavity with air. So you're expanding your lungs, and that provides a cushion for your spine to press against. This is going to help keep you in a neutral position. It's going to keep you safe and stabilized during your lift. Okay? So this is a great technique to use for everything from recovery to lifting. I want you guys to practice that. During normal days, we shallow breathe. We don't use our full lungs when you're walking around the house, when you're cleaning, when you're doing things. If you're not consciously thinking about it, you just breathe normally, right? You're not thinking about it. You're not pulling down deep into your diaphragm. We have to consciously do that when we work out. This is going to improve performance greatly. Okay? This is a move that we use as athletes, and it's something that we got to get good at. It's a skill that you have to develop. It's not gonna come naturally. Okay? They say that 5,000 repetitions is how much it takes to do something to where it becomes a subconscious action, where you don't have to think about it. So from now, just look forward and be like, yep, I'm going to use Ryan's breathing technique every single time for the rest of my life. until you don't have to think about it. Okay? So, okay, learning how to brace. Injury prevention. Okay? So now, once we brace, okay, the tricky thing about the core is that it works in several different ways. Okay? It can push, it can pull, it can resist, right? Create movement, but it can also resist movement. So the thing is that your core consciously is able to do all of those things simultaneously and in reverse at the same time. Okay, so when we talk about mind and body connection, body awareness, where are we at in space? How do we feel what we're doing? Okay, we talked about this today. Your force and your power, control, stabilization, all of these things can happen, again, simultaneously, and they can happen in reverse depending on what direction you're moving. Okay? So the best demonstration of that is kind of what we did this morning. So I'm going to have you come down to your mats. Okay? And I'm going to have you lay flat on your back. Okay? And we're going to stiffen everything. Okay? You're going to lock your legs, you're going to point your toes, and you're going to stiffen your whole body. And I want you to lift barely off the floor. Lift your shoulders, lift your legs, and just balance on your tailbone. Hands down the thighs, and you're just holding stiff. Now I want you to roll onto your hip. And then back to the other hip. This is called a hollow boat rock. So now as you're doing this, hold stiff and take away the momentum. Don't let yourself flop or go fast. Go as slow as you possibly can. As you roll, get all the way up onto the hip. Roll as far over as you can. Hold still, hold your core, hold your balance. So this is a good example, because as you are generating force to roll over, the opposite side of your core is resisting the momentum to go fast or to just allow it to roll. Okay, so right now, just doing this one simple move, right? If you've trained with me and you've done this hollow boat rock, it's sneaky. You get 4 or 5 reps and you're like, I feel silly. Okay, you get to 10 or 15, and we usually do it for a minute. You get to 10 or 15 and you're like, oh God, okay, right? And it's a simple movement, and a lot of the times it's the small movements that we do that are so hard and take so much work, because of the fact that you're working on so many levels. Okay, your transverse abdominis, your obliques, your rectus abdominis, your hip flexors, everything combined is working at the same time doing different jobs. And as you roll right to left, those sides switch rolls, right? Now I'm pushing, and now I'm resisting. Now I'm resisting and I'm pushing. See what I'm saying? So that's the best way that I can explain how it works simultaneously and in reverse at the same time. Okay? This is, again, something that takes practice and something that takes awareness to develop. Okay? We need to be able to control that. But how confusing is that? Because now I got to control one side that's resisting, I got to control one side that's generating power and movement, and I have to control them both at the same time, and then I got to switch them and control that too, right? So we send our brains through this big loop, but that's where mind-body connection is developed and trained, right? So that's why core all day, every day. Developing the awareness, developing that brace, and making those 5,000 reps so that it becomes a subconscious correction. And when it gets to that point, when you're out here lifting, you'll know immediately when you're not in a good position. When you're not in a neutral spine, you'll feel it right away. And you'll know it, and then your trainer won't have to correct. Take that arch out of your spine. Brace your core. We won't have to correct your form, because you'll do it naturally. I see it all the time as it develops with my clients, and I always compliment them on them. Good correction. I saw that. Because a lot of the times it's such a minute thing. It could be just as simple as what I just did. Right? As simple as that, or as simple as that. It could be just a tiny little thing, but those small corrections are what we need to improve on, so that we get stronger, we get faster, we improve our performance, but that we do that safely. Like I said, it's the only responsible way to train. Right? Especially for someone who's new to fitness, or especially for you guys who are kicking butt and working so hard. I mean, you guys are crushing this challenge. You guys are doing a great job. So when we work that hard, we put ourselves in danger. Not that it's a bad thing, not that I'm against it, but these are things that you need to be aware of, because especially when we're doing what we're doing, one injury takes you out a week, 2 weeks. We see it all the time. And then now you've lost all the progress that you've made for the last 2 months, and now you got 2 weeks to catch up, to finish strong. Not to say that it's the end of the world or anything. Obviously your safety comes first, but you know, it's my job, it's our jobs as trainers to make sure that that doesn't happen. So we have to train you how to do this, right? How to do this safely. So work on that. Work on your brace and work on developing that mind-body connection. Okay? Become aware of what you feel like when you're doing it. Become aware of what you're doing when you're doing it, how you're breathing when you're doing it, and use mirrors. These are the biggest tool that you have in your arsenal for developing that connection, because you have to see yourself. If you're leaned back and you can't tell that you're leaned back, well, how are you going to tell? Use a mirror. Oh man, I'm leaned back. right? Make those corrections. So use the mirrors when you're on the floor absolutely all the time when you can, okay? Because that's going to be a huge asset to you in developing this mind-body connection. So, any questions so far? Yeah. Absolutely. Yep. So again, that's just a conscious thing that you have to be aware of and that you have to fix until it becomes a subconscious action, a subconscious behavior. I mean, I have to remind people all the time, breathe. I yelled at you guys last night, breathe, right? The moment I see somebody holding their breath. But when we're lifting heavy, it's really easy to hold your breath. And not that that's necessarily a terrible thing, okay? If you're holding your breath when you're down, the reason why we use a pursed lip is so that we keep air in our lungs so that you can't push all your breath out. Because if you empty your lungs, then where's that cushion go for your spine? It's gone, right? So that's why we purse our lips. That's why we breathe out of a straw, so that we breathe out hard, which helps during the lift, but then you're still keeping air in your lungs to provide the cushion for your spine, okay? Can anybody tell me what a neutral spine position means? Okay.
It's kind of everything's kind of nice and straight and in line. Balance is kind of at your center. It's not forward, it's not behind, just sort of like right there in the middle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, when we talk about your spine, okay, and think of your spine as it is. Imagine it in your head, right? Natural curve, right? Your spine it's not straight, it has a curve to it. When we talk about where your pelvis and spine connect, okay, goes all the way down to your coccyx, all the way down to your tailbone, okay? If this is my pelvis and this is my spine, you cannot control the movement of your spine in the portion that's inside of your pelvis. There's no control over that. You have zero, right? It's connected to your hips. Okay, so we talk about your hips being a big sign as to whether you're in a neutral position or not. Okay, anterior and posterior tilt of your hips. So, demonstration, anterior, posterior. The minute that my hips tilt, I'm taking my spine out of neutral position. It has to start with your hips. Okay? We can pull the shoulders back as a cue that I use all the time, opening up your torso, sitting up big and tall so we're not hunched over. We're not adding any extra curve to your spine. That's your neutral position. Okay? Talked about it today with my class when we were doing kettlebell swings. How many of you have lower back pain and don't like to kettlebell swing? When you swing, does it hurt your back? When you do deadlifts, can you feel it in your lower back? Okay? 9 times out of 10, if you're experiencing that, it's because you're adding a curvature to your spine, or you're moving or tilting your hips in that position. Are you extending or flexing your back, or extending too far? Because if I'm kettlebell swinging and I lean forward, right, I'm putting a curve in my back. If I come up on my swing and I arch my back, I'm extending it, right? I'm flexing it. I'm putting extra curve, and that's going to put a strain on your lower back and take you out of neutral position. Small correction, right? When we were swinging today, very small correction. And Mark, one of my other clients, you guys know Mark, he's like, I can never not feel my lower back. Watched him, made that correction, stop moving your hips. He's like, that felt great. And he went heavy. He was swinging a 55 pound kettlebell today. Small corrections makes a big difference.
Is that why they always say, hold your chest up and keep looking forward? Because a lot of times I look down and say, hold your head up.
Yep. Yep. If you drop your head, Did that in our pulls today. If you drop your head, that's your cervical spine. You just curved it, right? And again, everything is connected, right? So if you curve your cervical spine, if you put your head down improperly, what's that pulling on? Right down the line. Pulls through your thoracic, pulls through your lumbar. Okay, that's why also, and I skipped over this in my notes, that's why we tell you to foam roll. Your IT band, your hip flexors, okay, those are most commonly tight on a lot of us. Okay, so when we loosen those up, when we stop those from being tight, not only is it a relief for the actual flexors or your IT band that you're foam rolling, but that's going to give you relief for your knees. It's going to give you release for your back and your glutes. If you have tight glutes all the time, right? Right? Tight hamstrings all the time. I have to consciously work on that to continue to foam roll, to continue to stretch every single day, because otherwise it'll just tug, right? And when you experience some sort of ache or pain, more than likely, I'll never say 100%, I'll just say 9 times out of 10. But it's most of the time, it's not where you feel the pain that you have the dysfunction. With Harrison, right, he was having this weird shoulder pain every time he ran. When he would go running, he would like dip his shoulder and he'd have this crazy pain in his shoulder, until he worked with Alex and they watched about how he was planting his feet when he was running, how he was rolling his feet. He started to consciously think about it, and he had a weird, I don't know exactly what it was, but he had a weird angle on his foot. He was like rolling off the side or something like that. As soon as he started to correct his form and how he put his feet down, shoulder pain went away. 9 times out of 10, it's something distal or proximal from the place that you're hurting. Who would think that your shoulder is in pain because you're putting your foot down on the ground wrong, right? But that's just how the body works. That's how the body works. So we got to think about all that. Foam rolling should be a part of everyone's program. Stretching, you should be doing this every day. Every day you train, even on days you don't. I encourage every single one of my clients to buy one, have one at home. On days that you're not, your active recovery days, foam roll. Did you get a foam roll today? Did you get a foam roll today? Go home and foam roll. Foam rolling isn't necessarily like a set time. People don't like it because it hurts. But, 15 minutes. Longer if you got a trouble area. Head to toe, toe to head. Whatever the case may be. Think of it like a current. Like a body of water, a current in a body of water. Okay, when we foam roll, we're trying to flush that fluid out, break up the fascia. So you don't have to, it's not like bad if you don't, but it's always a good idea to work in one direction. So that's why I say toe to head or head to toe, right? Flush it out, do them both, right? But that's going to be a big help, and especially with what we're doing, relating that back to your core, okay? This is going to help you stabilize. This is going to help you train yourself to move safely. Once we do that, then performance increases. Then we can lift heavier weights. We're lifting better. We have better form, better technique, better rep, better set, better day, better results. Copyright that, so don't steal it. Putting it on a t-shirt. Better rep, better set, better day, better results. So getting into movements. Okay, so without, like I said, without getting nerdy on anatomy and going all crazy, right? We'll just call it top, bottom, sides, upper, lower, okay? The very bottom of your core. Imagine if you had no arms, no legs. Everything else is core. Control and movement through the appendages. Okay? So when we talk about your crunches, okay? This is, again, your rectus abdominis. This is your frontal abs. Okay? Your rectus abdominis can only be isolated 30 degrees, either direction, from a neutral spine. So if you're laying flat on the ground, when you sit up and you sit all the way up to your knees, you're using your frontal abs, but you're bringing other hip flexors, you're bringing transverse abdominis, you're bringing other pieces of your core into the game, right? The frontal abs only have a 30 degrees. So crunches are great, right? If we want to work on the top of your core, the frontal abs, crunches are great. You don't have to come up as high as you think, okay? So think 30 degrees is really about here, okay? And same with the back extensions, right? If you back extend, same thing. You're only really going 30 degrees. Okay? Once we go further, if you think of like the back extensions that we do, and you have the back extension machine, if you're coming all the way up to where you're arching or you're overextending, you're bringing in your glutes, you're bringing in your hamstrings especially, right? So if your focus is your lower back, then you don't need to come up that high. And same thing for going all the way down. You don't need to come all the way down. Okay? Well, yeah, when you go all the way down, it's not an isolation for your hamstrings, but they become the primary through a certain degree of that range of motion. Right? So the further that you come down, the more that you do engage your hamstrings and your glutes. Now, if that's your focus, right, great. But when we train, first thing is what are we working? What are we targeting, right? Right. And with somebody who maybe has an ailment, maybe they have impingement of some kind, maybe they have back pain, maybe they have knee pain, maybe they have underdeveloped hip flexors. So as a trainer, these are things that I have to be very careful of, because if I'm asking them to do these core movements and there's an impingement, then I need to make modifications for that, right? Or I need to make modifications to work on that impingement and target it, again, because those little muscles, the little guys, they need special attention, right? So what are we targeting? What is the goal of this movement? Right? Where are we hitting? Right? So when we talk frontal abs, that's what I'm talking about. Okay? And one thing, and this is an interactive part, one thing that I train all of my clients from the very beginning, right? Because they got to know how crazy I am. So I tell them core is all day, every day. But if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. Okay? So when you lay down, I want you on your back. And this is kind of morbid, but I want you to think that you were staked to the ground right through the middle of the chest. If somebody drilled a stake down through your chest and you had no arms, how would you lift yourself off of that stake? Say not even a stake, say a piece of rebar that was concreted into the ground, right? And you had to lift yourself off of that. Would you crunch forward? No, because you're never going to get off the piece of rebar. Straight up. Okay? So when you lift, when you crunch, don't crunch here and just lift your shoulders and come forward. Okay? We're not just coming forward. Okay? Keep your core, keep your frontal abs, your rectus abdominis, keep them long. Okay? Lift your chest straight off. Think of that rebar. Lift off that stake. Okay? Big difference in the actual workload that you're doing. Okay? When you lift up versus lifting towards your knees and curling forward. Okay? Big focus, big difference. Okay? It's almost like if you curl up and you lift forward, it's like, what are you doing? Especially if we're only coming up 30 degrees. So in a crunch, returning back to the mat, that's your eccentric phase. That's where you breathe in. Okay? That doesn't change no matter what it is. A squat, a bicep curl, a crunch, doesn't matter. Eccentric phase is your intake. The workload, that's your exhale, pursed lips. Right? Through the straw. And that's keeping your spine neutral. That'll help in your position. Okay? So remember that 30 degree. When you're working out on your own, you don't have to come up as high as you think when we're targeting the frontals. Okay? Now the problem with a lot of my clients and One of my certifications is for prenatal and postpartum training. For all you moms, your core got blown up. Like literally, atomic bomb exploded inside of you and blew your core to hell. Absolutely. No, it is, you know, and it's the most underappreciated demographic in the fitness industry. And my personal belief is because trainers don't want to deal with the responsibility of training a pregnant woman or trying to rehab a pregnant woman after pregnancy, right? Because it is a medical condition. Medical docs won't tell you that. The medical industry doesn't look at pregnancy like it's a medical condition, but it is. Okay, for the damage that is done to your body, this is a medical condition that requires rehabilitation. Okay? That's why working out is so good for you while you're pregnant. It's amazing. Plus, it's incredibly beneficial for baby. Okay, while you're pregnant, to continue working out, absolutely, huge advocate. But like I said, people don't want to touch it because they're afraid of it. They don't know how to program for that. Okay? When Stephanie was pregnant with Lennon, that's when I got my certified whatever for that, so that I could train her before and after. Plus, it makes losing the baby weight makes it so much easier when you're in shape before having the baby. Then you can just. So with your crunches, okay, what are some different things that we can do? Okay, lifting off a stake. You can also think non-traditional forms. Hey, Ryan, where do you get this crazy? Right, straight out of Build an Athlete Handbook. We can use bands. You can do standing crunches. Okay, you don't have to be on the ground to do a crunch to engage your core. Use your toys. Use your kettlebells. Use your bands. Right? If we band up onto the TRX and you're holding here and you come down, right? Same thing. You can stand up. You can hit your knees. You can hit back by doing this too. Anything that you do, rotations, right? Obliques. You guys know this. Use that band. Take the band, tie it to a pole on the TRX, take a PVC pipe and put the PVC in the band so the band wraps around, hold it in front of your body, and take about half a foot, step out and see what your body does. Fires. Fires. Everything down that side, all the way down to your foot. Okay, when you use that resistance band, your body has to resist because you're being pulled. So you're resisting, again, force, power, movement, resistance at the same time. Right? So now we're working more of our core. Now we're learning. Okay, and we can feel what that feels like, and we can develop that connection when we're doing things that are kind of off the books, right? It doesn't have to be what you see on TikTok. It doesn't have to be all these, you know, leg lifts and things. Now, granted, we do a lot of that, but you know, it's all for a purpose. It's all for a purpose, right? We want to develop our hip flexors. We want to develop our abs. We want to develop this control, but there's 1,000 different things that you can do. In that example, okay, if we're talking progression, okay, and we're just going to use that example of band up around a pole and rotate, right? Lower back, absolutely. Obliques, absolutely. Rectus abdominis, absolutely. Transverse abdominis, absolutely, right? Your TVA, your transverse abdominis, that's that trouble spot that we all can't get rid of. Okay, that's that bottom roll that just doesn't go away. Wraps around your body, connects to your back, connects to your spine, but it's like a half a belt. Okay, that's the trouble spot to lose. But way to target it, right? We got to target it and build that up. For women, for moms, this is where you need to focus. Okay, Kegels are great. Kegel training is amazing for developing that pelvic floor, right? And there's a lot of reasons why. I know, I'm not going to say it, but I know. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why it's important to redevelop those muscles, not even just for performance and strength, but a way that we can focus on that is by putting your training intentionally into your lower core, your transverse abdominis, your pelvic floor, right? Putting that training into that. I'll show you more on that. But I'm getting off track. Back to the bands, okay? I want you guys to add this to your routine because this is one of my favorites, right? To band up and use the rotations. You can do them on cables. You can do them with the cable machines too, okay? But using that band is awesome because it's easy and you can step up your levels. You can use a skinny band. You can use a thick band, but you're having to stabilize more and you can resist more. Cables are great. I like the bands, okay? And there's more variation to the bands too. So if you just have the band and you're doing just the band, level 1, okay? Level 2 is to use that PVC pipe and put the band around the PVC pipe, hold one hand, hold down here, right? Away from the center of your body, okay? And you're rotating here, okay? Holding that PVC pipe. Another level, level 3, and this is like, Ryan, where do you come up with this? Okay, put a kettlebell on the band. Then put the band through, then put the PVC through it, and have somebody bounce. If you're with a trainer or if you're with a workout friend or something like that, have somebody bounce the kettlebell as you're holding it on that band. There's a lot of work in correction, okay? When we use the yoga balls, and when I had some people doing this the other day, and we come into plank and we're drawing circles with our elbows, okay? There's a lot of work, and it's not the moving part. It's the resistance. That's the work. Okay, what's holding still? That's where you're working hard. Another good one that I had him doing the other day, laying on top of it and kneeing, violently kneeing, okay, trying to knock yourself off of balance. But then you have to hold that correction just like you have to hold that kettlebell, okay? You're resisting the movement. When we think of planks, okay, just moving on, I have all this progressively training. So when we think planks, think of table legs, 4 legs of a table. If I take one leg away, your body naturally is going to put more weight in this arm, right? Because there's nothing here to support it. If I just put a little force, I'll fall on my face. But now if I take my body, watch how I shake immediately. If I take my body and I hold here, my core is working overtime because there's no stop shaking. Shake. Stop. Okay? It's about what's holding still, because that resistance creates so much force and so much contraction within your body. Develop that. Focus on that. Okay? So now, another good one is your rollouts. Okay? With an ab roller, the ab wheels. You can do this on TRX. We've done that a lot when we were doing TRX. Very good for your frontal, very good for your lower back too, right? Because we can't work the front without working the back when we return. So on those rollouts, even if you're using a flywheel, an ab wheel, resisting on the way down, pulling on the way up, your back is doing all the work to the return. Okay, those are great. There's one over there, a gray one, and it's got a handle on it. So you can hold plank. Okay? This is able to give you what's called a long lever. So when we talk about progression, okay, once you learn to control, something that you can do if you band up on the Smith machine, if you band up on the TRX and you hold and you push your arms away, your center of gravity is now way out in front of you. That's a long lever. Okay, with those ab wheels, we're pushing our arms out to a long lever position. That's why they're so hard. Okay, the great one that you got, you put your elbows on a pad, is amazing. And I'll have my clients come up into plank, okay, and they'll be on that with their elbows on the pad and just push that forward and watch how much work that is. Okay, when you hold plank, right, we usually teach you hands underneath your shoulders, but if I come here, Immediately. Immediately, right? So long lever. So you can upgrade by making small changes. You can make these more of a challenge. Okay? Don't be afraid of shaking. That just means you're working hard. If you start shaking, fight through it. That's okay. Just hold your position. Okay? Another one for lower core is anything that you're doing, any of these crunches, any of these things. If we add a leg hold, okay? If you've done combat with me, this is your urban ladder. It's the whole purpose of it. So anything where you extend those legs and you're up. When you were doing the rolls, okay, your legs being straight, lower abs are engaged, hip flexors are engaged, but this is a great way to target your pelvic floor. Okay? When we add movement to that, then we're moving more up into the hip flexors, but even just a hold. Okay? One thing that I've been doing is to gauge growth. Okay, we do a time of 1 rep max for your core, and you just hold. Hold. As long as you can. Okay? You can do that any day for yourself and watch your improvement. Core all day, every day. When you do that, watch your improvement. Maybe it's only 10, 15 seconds to start. As you improve, it's 20, 30. Go further, it's 45 minutes, right? Just like a plank, same thing. Okay, so do these things for yourself. We look at ourselves every day in the mirror. Do you see the changes that you make over the course of a month? Do you really see, oh man, I got skinnier here, I'm losing here? No. Because we look at ourselves every day, so we don't see the minute changes. If you're working out and you're doing this every single day, you're not seeing, we can't weigh your core. It doesn't show up on the in-body. So put yourself to little tests. It's just like a before and after photo, right? After the course of a month, 2 months, 3 months, like, man, 2 months ago I could only hold this for 20 seconds, but I'm up to a minute now, right? Do the same thing with planks, because those are progress markers. And we talk about why, we talk about motivation, accountability. Whenever I do the first and the second workouts, underneath the motivation and accountability, I always put the why and results. Because there's no bigger motivation than when you get results, right? You walk by the mirror, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, hey. Right? That feels good. Exactly. Things fit differently, right? And you look at the before and after photos, you look at these sort of results, you see your progress. Put it into numbers, right? Now, I'm not a fan of 1 rep maxes. I'm 40. I got no business going out here putting 300-something pounds on my back. No thanks, right? You see these young kids out here, I'm like, oh, you're going to regret that. Lift heavy, by all means, lift heavy, right? But I got no business doing all that. But I know how much I can lift 10 times. I know how much I can lift 5 times. That's okay. Lift heavy. Right? But use these numbers, use these things to gauge your improvement, right? Because of course you're going to be like, man, I feel great, right? Yeah. I feel great. I feel stronger than I ever have. But keep that motivation going by doing these things, by doing core work. If you don't do core every day, start. Your improvements will go up. You'll feel stronger. Your body wants to be strong in your core, right? Like I said, no arms, no legs. What's left? Core. Okay? Everything you do throughout the day requires core activation. Whether you're doing it correctly or incorrectly, whether you're bracing or not, you're still utilizing those muscles. We can do it better. We can move better. We can move safer, but that's why we train. That's why we develop it. But there's not a single thing that you do throughout the day where you're not engaging your core. Not one. Every time you sit, every time you stand. Right? How many of you struggle with hanging leg raises? Great for your lower core. Great for your pelvic floor when you do it right. Great for your frontal abs when you do it right. Okay? If you do it wrong, 9 times out of 10 it's because it's hard and it's all hip flexors, right? Another trouble spot is being able to posturally hold on the machines, right? It's different if you're hanging from a bar, because then you don't have to hold up your own weight. But when you're on our machines, right, you have to drive your shoulders down. You have to hold your weight through your elbows, and that gets tiring, right? In those leg lifts, right? So that's where we can develop, and you can improve your hip flexors, but you have to have an anterior tilt in that, okay? So if you're doing those, if you want to target your abs, it's not even full range of motion, all the way up, all the way down, but you got to pull your hips forward, okay? And as you're doing those leg lifts, have a bend in your knee. Don't lock your knees out, okay? That's putting more force into the hips. If you want to target abs when you're doing those, then hang, but leave a bent knee, right? And as you lower, now we're hitting all pelvic floor, okay? It's called the C crunch, and we do this all the time. So I'm going to have you guys come into position. I'm going to teach you what a C crunch is. Knees over hips. Use the mirror if you got a mirror. You guys don't, but shins need to be parallel to the floor. Okay, we're not down here. We're not way up here. 90 degrees. Okay, 2 movements. First movement is just that crunch up. Okay, you can do that holding your C crunch position. Just the hold engages your pelvic floor, the crunch, your upper abs. Okay, or you can add movement to the legs, and this is a hinge from the hip. You hold this 90 degrees in your feet. You hold that very still, very stiff. Okay, just the legs alone. If you were to do this for a minute, you're going to feel your lower abs going to work. If that's your mommy muscles, that's your pelvic floor. So now if we're going to add it, everything down, everything up. Here's your progression. Okay? Now while you're doing that with the C crunch, now you're activating pelvic floor to diaphragm. That's why it burns. That's why it catches fire like it does. Okay? So again, your focus should always be, what are you trying to target? Are you trying to target flexors? Are you trying to target abs, obliques? Right? Whatever the thing is. And that'll negotiate kind of how you develop your program or what it is that you're doing. With my guys, we do everything. Usually when we do core, like I said, all day, every day, I'll use different exercises. I try to make it so it's not the same every time, but we'll wrap around. We'll do them all, right? So the aim of the first 10, 15 minutes of a training session is front, sides, back, top and bottom. Okay, we try to wrap around. So if you just think that, right, you don't necessarily need to know the 29 muscles of the core and the anatomy. It'd be a waste of time for me to sit here and go through it and not like you to remember it anyway, and you guys just glaze over. I'm a dork, so I like it, but just think, front, sides, back, top, bottom. Okay, be intentional with your training. Okay, if you went to Keone's seminar, intentional training, right? Have intent with what you're doing for yourself. Your trainers are going to do that for you too, but on days that you're not with us, don't just come in and willy-nilly it. Have a plan. Have an intent. And if you're hitting core, unless you have a trouble spot, moms, lower, right? But if you're just coming in to bust your core up, front, sides, top, bottom, hit it, get it, right? Wrap it around. It's a great warm-up. Get your blood flow, brings all of your body in. You're ready to hit the floor at that point, right? So that's why I like to start with it, not end with it, because that's my client's warm-up. Not that it's easy warm-up by any means. Okay, so the next one, targeting your obliques. Okay, we talked about your rotations. Okay, whenever we rotate, now we're using the obliques. So if we're going to target the sides, right? When we did those rollers, obliques were involved. The one thing that I want you to know that's probably the common oblique lift is your Russian twists. You need to be very careful about your Russian twists. Okay? They're common. Everyone does them. 9 times out of 10, you do them wrong. Okay? When we think about your spine, your lumbar spine is considered a stabilized joint. It is an immobile. There is mobility, there is movement. It's limited. But the way that your body is designed, your lower back is meant to stabilize. Your thoracic, your middle back, now that's a mobile joint, right? We can snake, we can body roll, right? We're allowed to move. Your cervical, your upper back, this is, again, immobile joint. This is a stabilization joint. No matter what you think, your head is heavy. Okay, holding your head on your shoulders. I'm guilty when I drive, especially when it's raining. I have to constantly remind myself to hold my head back, right? When I sit, I'm even sitting here talking about core, I keep catching myself slouching, right? So holding posture, again, is something that we have to be conscious of, okay? With your Russian twists, okay? When you're twisting, whether your feet are in the air or your feet are down, when you're twisting, a lot of the times it's just your arms, okay? I'm not using any obliques. Even if I had a big heavy kettlebell, all I'm doing is lifting a kettlebell from hip to hip, okay? That's mistake number 1, is you rely on your arms. Mistake number 2 is that you're turning your hips. If you're doing a Russian twist correctly, okay, to engage the obliques the way that you should, your lumbar spine should be relatively stabilized. Same with your hips. The movement comes from your thoracic, from the middle of your back, okay? And so we're reaching here. Now, it's more of a shoulder turn. I'm not reaching my shoulders across, but my shoulders are now kind of going half circle. That's what's engaging my core. Okay? And if you're doing it with resistance, if you have a kettlebell or a dumbbell or a medicine ball and you're tapping it side to side, don't tap it right next to your body, reach it. Reach it out away from you. Long lever, right? We're away from the center of gravity. That's going to add much more work. Where you sit here and you twist for a minute, guarantee you do it right, 30 seconds, you'll be burnt. That's fine. I mean, if you're 1,000 ways of doing 1,000 things, right? So if you have your feet down and you're twisting here, that's okay. If you're targeting your obliques, the movement in your legs is an unnecessary movement. Yes, either way. So this would be an easier version. A progression would be to hold your feet up. And if you're rotating, then there's naturally going to be some movement, okay? But again, it just depends on your training focus. Okay, holding that and adding rotation is going to put some work in, more work for your hip flexors. It's going to bring some other muscles into the game, right? Because now you have more movement. So obviously more muscles are going to have to work to control that movement. Not that it's a bad thing or you know, it's a harder progression up. But again, you know, it's just a consideration of what your intention is. What are you trying to focus? Nothing wrong with it, right? But you have to know that what you're targeting, if you're taking that targeted muscle out of the equation because of adding different movement, that's where it would be quote unquote wrong. Okay, so if I'm adding a movement, but then I'm taking my obliques out of it because of that movement, and I'm trying to target my obliques, then it's a pointless movement. That's the only thing that would render that as don't do it. So anything that you're coming transversely, so cross crawls, okay, iron cross, these are all oblique targeted. So if we're talking down the abs, your cross crawl, right, we can come here and you can run it and now we're adding hip flexors and a little bit of lower core. Okay, you can hold that C crunch and just come here. Okay, it's not your elbow, shoulder to opposite leg. Okay, that's why fingertips to temple, but that turn over. And remember the 30 degrees. You don't need to come up high when you're doing this. Intentional targeting, right? If I'm holding up here, or if I'm doing my cross crawl and I'm pulling here, then I'm using more muscles. Okay, just a simple oblique, like we're just coming here, you don't need to come up any higher than that. Doing that and coming up, you're still engaging your frontal core too, but you're hitting down the oblique, you're hitting down the target. Your iron cross, if you lay down, and we're jammed up, so I'm not going to have you do this, but you take, oh, I just got time. You take one leg out 45 degrees, one arm 45 degrees. Straight arm, straight leg. Up and tap. You're not coming up very high. Hip flexor, obliques, everything's working. Chris just looked in and gave me the time. I'm 5 minutes over. Do you guys have any questions? So big takeaways. Intentional training, how to brace your core, how to use your core for performance. Make sure that you're moving safe, and active practice. Actively practice drawing in and bracing as you lift. Intentionally practice that as you recover. It'll help. It'll help.